The triumphant return of basketball gospel after a long summer hiatus where nothing happened in the NBA. The poor NBA media had to talk about Jonathan Kuminga and Kawhi Leonard for months. It was brutal. But the NBA is back, we're back, and for the first couple episodes, Cake and I do our annual over-unders. We start with the West, second episode, the East, with our award predictions. We did this over Zoom, and I had the wrong mic selected, unfortunately. Bit rusty, first episode back in a long time. So unfortunately, my microphone quality is not very good. I tried to clean it up as best I could, but I will definitely have that sorted out going forward. Enjoy these two episodes and enjoy the start of the NBA season. We're going to start with the West. We're just going to go in order of the projected wins, and we're using FanDuel's regular season win odds for this one as of
Are you
today.
sponsored?
I am not. I want to make that very clear. I don't want FanDuel sending me any letters. All right, so first team, the highest win total projected for the West is the Oklahoma City Thunder. The over-under is 62 and a half wins. Last year, they won 68 games. So I'll go first on this one. I went under. Um, I don't think that they're going to necessarily mow through the regular season in the same way. And I also think that there's been improvement throughout the West that's going to bring their number down a bit. So it's not a lock for me. It's sort of a slight under, but I have them winning the most games in the West. I just don't think anyone in the West is going to get to 60 games, 60 wins.
I'm also not a lock on this prediction, but I do think it's an over. 7 games less or 6 games less than what they won last year, and they brought back essentially the same team. If you look at how their injury luck last year, they were actually very unlucky losing Chet Holmgren to injury. I think they lost Jalen Williams for a short period of time. They didn't have Hardenstein to start the year, so they actually had very bad injury luck. I also think that this team is young, so I don't think that the typical kind of NBA final fatigue is going to hit this team the same way. Also, SGA's game is just built so smoothly and differently. I don't think he exerts a lot of energy to put up big numbers and be a leader. And their depth and coaching is too good. I think they're a regular season monster, and they've established that. And 7 wins less than last year is a little bit too much for me. I can easily see them going 63 or 64 wins, and they're still hitting that over. So or 64 wins, and they're still hitting the over. So I'm going to go over.
All fair points. I think last year the efficiency we saw was, they ranked among the greatest teams of all time in terms of point differential. And 68 wins is obviously is way up there as well. So they really just steamrolled everybody last year. And so I don't mean to call it an anomaly, but it was a historical year. So I'm sort of betting against that level of historic dominance over the rest of the league. And again, the other factor being that I think a handful of contenders beneath them in the standings have improved as well. So that's where I come out with that. But I can't argue with any of your points there that they have the continuity coming off their championship run. They're more confident. They have health entering the season. Everybody, all these young players, is 1 year older and presumably a bit better, more seasoned. So all of that makes sense. But that's my prediction.
I do want to put one thing on here that probably will carry out throughout these predictions. Defense carries and travels, and typically defense is a good indicator. When you have a defensive unit team, I always feel like you're going to do better in the regular season. So that's another reason why I think that they're fantastic, is they're just a defensive juggernaut. So no game beating them in any game is going to be difficult, even when they have their off nights, which is why I think they're just going to rack up regular season wins.
Okay. Why don't you start on the next one? The next highest team is the Denver Nuggets with the over under at 53 and a half.
Yeah, so
And
this team
and
is
real quick, last year they won 50 games. Go ahead.
yeah, this team is I'm going under on this one. Um, This team is coming into this offseason, and I get why everybody's really excited about them. I get why people think Cam Johnson was an upgrade and filling out some of their backup roles, specifically getting Valanciunas to give Jokic kind of a break and have some more um, uh, depth behind Jokic is all good, but they haven't won more than 53 games in Jokic's entire career, other than one season. There has been one season where they have done that, and I don't understand why anybody would bet the over on this because they've historically proven otherwise. So I think this is a very easy under. That being said, I understand and recognize that they will be fantastic in the playoffs and they will be hard out. But this gets back to my point about the Thunder, whereas regular racking up regular season wins and racking up playoff wins is very different. And the Nuggets have historically underperformed in the regular season. So this isn't me saying that I think the Nuggets are not title contenders because they are. I just think they're probably going to finish somewhere around like 50-ish, 50, no more than like 51 wins. And they're going to make the playoffs and compete, but I don't think they're going to hit the over because they've never done it before other than one season.
I have them as a slight over. I have them winning somewhere around like 55 wins. And the reason for that is I think that they added some key depth pieces. You mentioned them already, but I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is a key one. Bruce Brown's being talked about a lot, and same as Valanciunas. But I think Hardaway Jr. gives them some firepower that they've been missing a bit, and makes up for some of that 3-point shooting from Michael Porter Jr. I think that Cam Johnson is. I don't like to compare players directly and act as if the team just has that simple, like the math is that simple. But I do think that he helps them more than Michael Porter Jr. did. Whether that'll translate to wins or not, we'll see. Christian Brown's another year older, and I think he's going to take a bit of a step forward. He just signed a big extension. But I think a big point about this team is that their key reserves in Strother and Peyton Watson, um, and to a lesser degree, guys like Pickett or Zeke Naji. I mean, Zeke Naji kind of had trouble seeing the floor as the season went on, but um, these are guys that were playing like seventh, eighth, ninth men, and they've been bumped down to their, I think, more appropriate positions of like ninth, 10th, and 11th men. And I think that that means that this team is suddenly much deeper than it has been in Jokic's tenure, other than possibly the year they won the title. Um, De'Ron Holmes, they hope to see some minutes from him this year. I just think that this team has a lot going for it. And then another major point as well is I think that what gives this team a bit of a fire under them is the momentum they're carrying from the end of last season when they made their coaching change, which I'll wave the white flag on. David Adelman ended up being a great fit with this group, and I think that that momentum is going to carry into the start of this regular season. I think they're going to be a team that gets off to a tremendous start. Now, whether they decide to take their foot off the gas and rest as they go into the end of the regular season, that could hurt their record, and that's what they've done in years past. So you make a good point there that that's had an impact on their win totals the last few years, but I just happen to think this team, particularly, is going to get off to a really strong start. They're going to jump out to like, I think 17-3, something like that, just a tear to start the season. I think these new guys are going to be a bit of a breath of fresh air, and I think that they align well with their coach. So there's just a lot to like about this Denver team, in my opinion. And like always, it'll to me come down to how many games is Jamal Murray going to play. Um,
I
I mean, that's kind of a lazy take, but that
Yeah,
to me
Cam
is one of
Johnson.
the well, that's to me one of the flaws that sticks out to me on their roster is they were unable to acquire a ball dominant ball handler, creator off the pick and roll that can step in for Murray if he has to miss time, which historically he does. So I hope that they maybe make one more trade. We'll see. But that stuff is
I
more
don't think
important
they
in a
can.
series than in the regular season.
They're a second apron team. I don't think that they're going to be able to make any more trades.
I don't think they
I
are a second apron team.
They're at least a first apron team, so they are
Yeah,
going to be constricted in that regard. But More so, this is just a pure analytics. If you look at Jokic's this Denver iteration of the Denver Nuggets throughout his career, they literally only hit this number once. And I'd be so, and I maybe all the reasons you just said is why you think this team is different, but I don't think that this team is that much more talented on the peripherals that they're going to do something that they just historically and mathematically never do.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking a difference of like 5 or 6 games. I don't think that that's a lot to ask from where they generally finish. So I don't think it's asking a lot. I think it'll depend on if they have fall into this tendency or strategy, I guess you could say, that they've done of coasting into the playoffs if they happen to be up there in the standings and maybe they start to rest guys as the season wears on. That to me would be what would keep them away from this win total. Um,
I don't even think that that is a reason why they don't hit this number that they rest guys or they tank or uh, they just are not a team that's built to do well in a regular season. Jokic is such a plotting player who's great when he doesn't have to play back to backs and doesn't have to fly, around all over the country and things of that nature. They're just not built to be a regular season monster. But I also want to do mention, I think we should put out there all of these conversations. We can put a caveat on every single one of them that like if Jokic stays healthy or if Murray stays healthy. I mean, injuries you can't predict them, and that could screw up our over unders every single time. So I'm almost operating off the assumption as if they were or are going to be healthy.
okay, I mean that's fair. I think someone like Murray is. I think it's fair to kind of underline him, but I that's a fair assumption if we want to carry that through. But um, yeah, I think he's really him and Porter Jr. were really the only guys that we saw miss a lot of games. So from that respect, I do think that this is a strong regular season team. And again, they have more depth than they've had in many years. So um, that's where we differ. But let's move on to the third team. Third team is the Houston Rockets with an over under of 52 and a half. I went under here. I think this team is going to have some adjustments to make throughout the year. I love this roster come playoff time. I think they're going to be really hard to beat in a series. I loved what they did in the offseason. I don't want to go into too much what I think of their team because I have an idea. I have ideas about them for one of my next couple episodes. Um, but I don't think that the Van Vliet loss is as tragic as it was made out to be when it happened. I mean, it's certainly a big loss, but the good thing about the Rockets is they have assets to replace him, uh, which I expect them to do at some point. But I just think this team is a combination of a team that's going to be really hard to beat, but also has a lot of adjustments to make offensively and things to figure out. I don't know if you're watching the game tonight, but there were some key moments there, and I think it's going to be a bit of a work in progress, and they'll hit their stride around the All-Star break. So I don't have them up with these other teams that have a bit more continuity. And I mean, they changed their best player, and that's going to have a certain impact on their win total. So I have them as kind of a slight under. I think that they get to 50 wins, but I think 53 sounds a little high for me. So I think 50, 51, something like that.
Yeah, so this is another one of those teams that it's built around defense. It has a lot of youth. Ime Udoka is historically a coach that loves to win every single game and is going to go after it every single game. You're never going to see him kind of tanking down the end of the year or trying to rest guys down the end of the year. They also have great depth. They added a lot in the offseason. I don't disagree with you in the sense that Van Vliet is probably not, the loss of him is not going to have as big of an impact as some may think, because I do think that, if Reed Shepherd takes a step forward and, Amin Thompson can become even more of a playmaker and more of a ball handler, they can advance and you could see these guys taking step forwards. But again, this is a team like the Thunder who is going to be just a regular season monster with their defense. Every single night, they're going to be a grind to play. And now with somebody like KD, they can put up points. And tonight, as you mentioned, they did. They played the Thunder tough in Thunder's house in Oklahoma City, which is impressive. But I also think that they are going to be a candidate to make a trade, and it could even become like a quasi big trade at some point. So I think that this is a number that they are going to hit. I also want to go on record. Sengun, I think, is going to take a step forward, and that's not just because of the game he had tonight, but I actually predicted it to those around me on a daily ahead of time that I think he's going to have an awesome season. And I think he's going to fill a lot of the facilitator role that Van Vliet was taking up on. So I see him taking another step forward and getting even better. So I really like this team. I think they're going to hit the over.
It's a great point about Şengün. I was thinking it as I was watching the game tonight that um, a lot of what they're lacking in terms of a playmaker with the ball in their hands, um, that Şengün is going to fill in some of that role. They really give it to either him or Durant and try to come up with something around one of those guys, which looks a bit clunky to me right now, but they're going to lean on him a lot, and I think his play is going to be super emphasized to start the first few months of the season. So I think he's going to be a clear all-star. And I
And you
agree
didn't
with you.
mention
It's
it
probably going to
earlier.
be a career year.
You didn't mention it earlier, but they won 52 games last year. So um, to think that they can win one or two more games is with the advancements they made on the roster and just the natural development of the team. I don't that's not a huge leap.
Yeah, I don't like to make comparisons to the previous team and say, what did they do this offseason? I don't really use that much. I mean, it's a factor, but I tend to think of it, I look at more of the landscape of their competition and then also kind of what the motivations of the team and what's like the script of the season going to look like for the team and try to predict that as best I can. So I
Yeah,
think
but
their
to
team
that
is
end,
better. So I agree with that. Their team is better than it was last year.
though, Durant only has so many years left. They cannot waste time dicking around every single season and waiting for guys to develop. They need to win now. Like the moves they made this offseason were win now moves. So they're all in from my perspective. And I know the trade itself on paper wasn't they didn't end up giving that much up, but this is certainly an all in trade because they're no longer centered around youth. They're going for it. So and I think that it's going to be reflected in the way that they play this year.
Yeah, agreed. But I also think you can make an argument then that they have reason to make sure they don't wear out Durant because um, they can't lean on him too heavily throughout the year, which again goes back to your point about Şengün that they're going to lean on him quite a bit. So um, great defensive team. My main reason for the downgrade is I think there's a big trade that they're going to make that they're going to have to adjust to. I think that the offense is going to be a work in progress for the first few months of the season. Um, and then I think on top of that, they're going to be careful with Durant throughout the year to make sure they don't wear him out too much before the playoffs. And so this is a great team. I still have them winning 50 games, but I'm not optimistic that it's going to be in the mid 50s at all. I think that they're barely going to crack 50. So moving on to the next team, which I'll let you start with if you'd like, is the Los Angeles Clippers with an over under of 49 and a half. And looking at the standings here, they won 50 games last year.
Really well coached team. Tyronn Lue has established himself as a very good coach. They didn't have Kawhi for a majority of the year last year. Um, so you would think that assuming his health that they would only be better. There were a lot of distractions in the offseason that you may or may not talk about. I'm guessing you skipped over that because that's not kind of the focus of your pod. You like to focus on stuff on the court. Um, but they are a year older. I do think James Harden had a really magnificent bounce back year last year and was very healthy, played a lot of games. Zubac, I think, had a career year, which I don't necessarily think you can bank on. They are a very good team. But that being said, I think they are going to take a slight step back and they're not going to hit the 40. They're not going to win more than 50 games. So I think as long as they win in the 40s, I hit the under and I'm good. So I'm going under.
Yeah, this is the one. I think this is the first one we've agreed on, right? I have them as a slight under, because yeah, 50 games given those other teams we've just talked about, is going to be a tough one for them. I have them basically just outside of that group we just spoke of, and I have them winning like 48, a game or two less than they won last year. But I'm very optimistic about this team. Um, we'll see what they look like come playoff time, how they hold up throughout the year. But their depth is, despite it being old, they have a lot of depth. And like you said, they're well coached. They play defense. I think Brooke Lopez was a key addition. I liked the John Collins pickup. They just have a lot of good players. You look at their depth chart and they have like 12 good players. And so I think even if they do have some foul trouble, as long as it's not too much, or I'm sorry, not foul trouble, health. As long if they have some health issues, some availability issues, as long as James Harden is there, and even if he has slight stretches, they still have a guy like Chris Paul. I'm just optimistic about this team. I think they're definitely not at risk of missing the play-in. Um, and I don't think the distractions are as big of a deal, but we'll see if some sort of punishment comes down for Kawhi. That obviously uh, makes a huge difference on what their final record is going to be if he gets suspended or something like that. But I love what they did in the offseason, and I like their chances this year. We'll see how they stack up come playoff time, but I really like what the Clippers did, and I'm bullish on them this upcoming season.
Hey, I love them if this was the 2022-2023 season. They'd be a great team, but
That's fair, but they just have so many guys that they're not asking all of those guys to be what they were in their primes. It looks like just a great list of old names, but I think it's a group that fits really well together. I think they're going to be focused and rowing in the same direction, that old cliche. And so I just think highly of them this upcoming season. And we'll see how big of a distraction all this stuff was. But
I just
I
think it
happen
was
to think they're going to be fine.
I just want to put it out there. They did add a bunch of pieces. I don't again, I think it's a lot of old pieces, and there is such thing as you end up diluting the talent, so to speak. I mean, you look at their depth chart and guys that I really like someone like Derek Jones is like sitting there as a third stringer. And I'm like, I love this guy. How are we going to get him minutes? And it's going to be a weird balance where um, you almost dilute some of the impact some of these players have on the team in the interest of having depth. And that again goes back to the point where I almost kind of think that at sometimes, especially with a lot of players on this team that are on the back half of their career, that they're more of a playoff contender as opposed to somebody who's going to rack up a bunch of regular season wins.
Okay. Yeah, fair point. As a counterpoint, I think Ty Lue is one of the more creative coaches in the league. I could see if anyone is going to have a too many guys problem and deal with it successfully, I think it's him. I think we're going to see relatively limited minutes from some of the older players on their roster, namely guys like Chris Paul, Batum, and Lopez. I could see them around the 20-minute mark. And so I think he's going to get really creative with lineups. We know that Kawhi is going to rest a lot. Um, we'll see how big of a deal Bradley Beal is going to be to this team. But um, I really like the mix of guys. I like how many guys they have. And I think this is going to be a smart, well coached team that's just going to understand what their objective is with who they are on the court. So I just think that this is going to translate to a really good team throughout the regular season. I'm a little worried about them defensively, but I think offensively they're going to be really good. So we'll see what that
They're,
translates to. But
they're a
48
good
wins for me.
they're a good example in my team, in my eyes, of a team that like goes on an Eastern Conference road trip on a back to back goes to play Charlotte, a game that they should win, and then they just get boat raced because they're sitting guys and Charlotte puts up 134 on them. And they're just so old. Like these teams historically usually never hit their over. And we both are in agreement on this, it sounds like, but 50 is too high.
Yeah, I think this over under is appropriate. Um, but yeah, I think like for example, I don't think they'll win less than 45. But I don't think they're winning 50. They're going to be somewhere in there. Next team, the Minnesota Timberwolves over under is 48 and a half. Last season they won 49 games. Talk about a team I'm bullish on. This is a lock on the over for me.
Same.
In fact, I have this team winning more games than all of the teams we've talked about already, except for Oklahoma City. I think this will be the 2 seed in the West. Um, my reasons for that, I think we're going to see another step forward from Anthony Edwards. I think that the whole Julius Randle experiment with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert has been very successful. They have a lot of momentum coming off their playoff run. I think that we're going to finally see Rob Dillingham. I wouldn't be surprised to see this team make some sort of extra move with their roster. One of my predictions for this team, I actually think by the end of the season that we could see Naz Reid and Randle starting with Gobert coming off the bench. Um, I could see that being the case, and I think that makes them much more potent offensively while not losing as much defensively. So I think Randle coming back signaled that for me that it's something to look out for. But I just think this group has a lot of continuity and they have good depth. I love their rotation. A big reason they wouldn't win this many games is if Rob Dillingham ends up being a nothing and Terrence Shannon Jr. can't step into the void that they lost with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I happen to think that I feel optimistic about both of those players. And then a lot of Minnesota fans are excited about Jalen Clark too. And then Behringer is another guy that I think is gonna play some good minutes for them. So I really like what they did with their offseason. And again, I think they have a move in them. So I think this team is just going to have a lot of wind at its back, and it's gonna have a similar season that Oklahoma City had last year, just not as much talent or ability to just mow through these teams with the point differential. But I think that they're going to surprise some people this year.
Yeah, also a lock for me, also an over for me. I agree with most of what you said outside of some of your speculation about lineup rotations and things of that nature. That's kind of hard for me to predict. The one, as you noted, I am worried about their guard play and their point guard play and who's going to handle the ball outside of Ant. That does concern me. I do think that they are a buyout candidate team. I can definitely see them as like a team where a veteran a veteran point guard who's gets bought out. There's no names that come to mind, but I think they are a candidate for a guy like that to go to as, that's an opportunity for them to come into a playoff contender and have meaningful minutes. Behringer's a sleeper rookie for me. I think he could be a second team all rookie player kind of player. I really like him as a defender. They're just good on both sides of the court. It just goes back to my point earlier. If you haven't picked up the theme, incredible defensive teams, young. They have a superstar in this case who I think is going to take another step forward and be in the MVP talks again. And I just, outside of Gobert, I know he's not young, but I, I kind of just love the core of this team all being in a point in their career where they can be taking step forwards, and they're just going to be a nightmare to play every single night. And this is a team that is just going to rattle off regular season wins, just like the Rockets and the Thunder, which is why they're a lock over for me.
Yeah, this is the biggest agreement we've had thus far. Just really love this team. I think they have a really good shot in the playoffs too, but we'll obviously revisit that closer to the playoffs. But to go to what you said about a buyout candidate, just as a side note, one transaction this offseason I was disappointed in was Westbrook going to the Kings. I was really hoping that he would join this team and give them like 15 minutes a game. Now, NBA fans hate Westbrook. But I actually think this would be kind of an exception in terms of a team that he would have fit really nicely with. So I was actually hoping to see that. Instead, he's just going to go have a pedestrian, who cares season in Sacramento. We'll get to Sacramento later. But I think that, yeah, I think they need another guard. But again, if Rob Dillingham really pops, we'll see. And then that was what was so smart about grabbing DiVincenzo is it gives them a bit of insurance too. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for them. It's just something that they'll have to figure out before the playoffs come around. Next team, the Golden State Warriors. The over-under is 47 and a half. And let's grab their last season's win total. But
This is
I
an
don't think it was
example where it really
47 and a
doesn't
half.
matter what they won last year
Yeah.
because the team is it looks so much different. Um, I'll just start here
Yeah,
while
go
you
ahead
look
and
that
start
up.
because I started on
Yeah,
Minnesota.
this is another, again,
They won 48 games last year.
if you're not catching a theme here with me, this is an under. For me, this is exactly the type of team that's not going to pile up regular season wins. They're old. Jimmy Butler historically never wins a lot of games in the regular season. Steph Curry's at that age where he all of a sudden will sit out like 2, 3 weeks and
Yeah, he'll have like a calf strain.
yeah, and he'll. This is just an easy under for me. I'm not a huge fan of the makeup of the team either. Al Horford's fine, but at this stage of his career, I don't know necessarily how much he's moving the needle in terms of wins. But this is not going to be a team that is going to win a lot of. That's going to be like a regular season monster. So this is a pretty easy under. I'm not going to go lock just because I'm never going to lock against Steph Curry, but it's a pretty easy under.
I will lock against Steph Curry. I had this as a hard under. Um, 47 and a half is very generous to me. I think they're going to be somewhere around 42 or 43 wins. I think that they'll be a play-in team, and that's generally around the number of wins, at least the last couple of years in the West, that the 8, 9, 10 seed has. I am pessimistic about this team. I don't like the moves they made. I don't like that they basically put the roster together just before the season started, and this Kuminga situation hung over the team throughout the year. Now, some may say that a veteran team like this, that kind of stuff doesn't matter, but I think that Kuminga monkey wrench of are they going to trade him? Are they not going to trade him? And they're almost assuredly looking to trade him. If they're doing that, then they're going to want to showcase him. How does that play into how this team operates in the first few months of the season? And like you said, I don't like the makeup of the team. I do like the Al Horford edition. I think he made sense as another big to go with Quentin Post and Draymond Green. But on paper he makes sense to me from a collection of big standpoint. He fits nicely to me, but at his age, you never know what to expect. Um, I just don't like the makeup of this team. It's like their best lineup doesn't shoot well enough, and then their their backups don't play good enough defense. So I feel like this team is lacking both defense and shooting somehow, even though they have some good defenders on their team. They have some good shooters on their team. But I think this is going to be a challenge for them to come up with lineups that are actually viable on both ends of the floor. And again, the Kuminga thing I think is a bigger issue than it's being made out to be. And so who knows if when they trade him, what that's going to be like. I just think this is a team I think that's going to coast through the regular season and just do a lot of experimenting. And I do not think they're going to be several games above 500. I think they're just going to squeak into the playoff picture.
We
And
agree.
them being old doesn't help. I
It's
mean,
a it's a
that is all said without taking into account their age.
recipe for the under on regular season wins.
Absolutely. And kind of on the same note, this one may be kind of controversial, but the next team up is the Los Angeles Lakers, a similar over under 46 and a half. I went with the under, not a lock like the Warriors. I'm not as pessimistic about the Lakers, but I don't see them as part of that group at the top of the West, so that top six. I do think that they're going to be a play-in team. I don't like what they did in the offseason from a like results this season standpoint. I think that they had some good ideas in terms of how to move forward with Luka, but that's another conversation. Um, I just don't really like the makeup of the roster. I don't think this team is going to play any defense at all. They're basically just going to let Luka go crazy. I think LeBron is going to be in and out throughout the year. Um, Ayton, I think, I think he's a good fit with Luka, but again, I think what's his name? Dorian Finney-Smith was a bigger loss than it's getting credit for. He was kind of their only plus defender, other than a guy like Hachimura, who's above average. But um, if they're just going to shoot out these other teams and win track meets, like that, to me, that's the only formula I could see where they're winning in the high 40s. I think they're going to be like 44 and 38, something like that. So that's why I'm the slight under on this number.
You didn't mention the number.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I did 46 and a half.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting number. I think they set it at a good point because man, uh, a Luca team by himself with a bunch of no names around that can kind of, as long as he's healthy, can hit that that over pretty easily. We've seen it. We've seen him do it in his career. Um, but that's a lot of money that you're allocating towards LeBron James. And I don't like the nature of his injury. Sciatica is a very, very complicated, painful thing to have to deal with. And it's not like you can just kind of go get a surgery and fix it and then you're good to go. It's kind of something that it's almost pain tolerance and management. Now, he's probably the greatest player ever at body management and keeping his body healthy, and he's proven that as a track record. But then when you look at, as you mentioned earlier, the other pieces around, I don't like Aiton. They're defensively, they're going to probably be a sieve. And to your point, having to go out and compete and score a bunch of points against a bunch of really really good defensive teams that I've already mentioned are these teams that are just going to be piling up regular season wins. It's also a soft under for me. I don't love doing that against Doncic, but if gun to my head, if I had to pick over or under, I'd rather be on the under here. They can prove me wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Lakers fans will say something like, we were starting Hayes and now we're starting Aiton, or, we didn't have a backup point guard and now we have Marcus Smart, or, things like that. And to me, they just pulled items out of the bargain bin this summer without any real thought about how it was going to translate to their strengths and weaknesses. And that's what this roster looks like to me. It's just a hodgepodge of names that we recognize without any real strengths I'm seeing. It's just a bunch of decent players with Luka. And to your point, maybe that's enough to win in the high 40s. But I think that the teams ahead of them, maybe not the Warriors, because I actually I have this team winning more games than the Warriors, but I think I don't know how you get win in the high 40s and when you have all these other good teams. And I also think that there's a few teams down at the bottom of the West that are going to win more games than they won last year. Um, so I'm just pessimistic about this group. They're definitely going to make the play in, and so I'm not talking about them necessarily and what they're going to look like in April. But I think that this isn't a very impressive team, and I'm not expecting a lot this regular season. I think they're going to be a few games above 500.
I just think it's funny. Lastly, anybody who wants to talk about the Lakers offseason and wants to talk about how DeAndre Ayton was an upgrade over anything is somebody who didn't watch the Blazers and doesn't actually appreciate how what a boneheaded basketball player he is and how he does not contribute to winning basketball. Um,
They just told him to go away.
yeah, this is a guy that two teams now have really paid to get off my team, and he just doesn't contribute to winning basketball. And he's not the prototypical center that we see be successful alongside the Doncic. And those people are those that are rim runners, set screen, roll, catch alley-oops. Aiden wants to have the ball at the top of the key, couple jab steps, and then pull up a three in front of your face. So, yeah, um, I don't like their additions either. Now, that being said, I do want to go on record. We could see a Austin Reeves step forward and kind of a career year here for him. I kind of do
Yeah,
like him as a
they're going to need
breakout.
it.
Yeah.
Um, Next team. This one's a bit of a tricky one, in my opinion. The San Antonio Spurs. The over-under is 44 and a half. I think this is a team that a lot of fans are going to be overrating coming into this year. I do have them with a slight over here. I have them, the Warriors, and the Lakers kind of all around the same win total. Um, oh, and the next team that we're about to get to. Um, so I'm not necessarily pessimistic about the Spurs, but I think 44 and a half is like kind of right on there. I have them with a slight over. You hope that all of the health issues from Wembanyama are behind him, but um, this is basically the same team, and we'll see what they get out of Dylan Harper. But it's tough to make that leap from a team that is winning 30 games to suddenly you expect them to win 45, 46. And I think hoping for any more than that is unrealistic. So I think what I'm already asking of them is unrealistic. I think they're just going to barely hit that number of being a little bit over 500. I think they're going to make the play-in picture. Um, but I'm not any more optimistic about them than that. I think that Wembanyama is going to have a huge year. I think Fox will just be okay. And then that'll be a contract that they'll have to deal with going forward. But yeah, I don't know what's there on this team to be super excited about. I like a lot of their players, but they're young and they haven't won anything. So there's a lot to prove here. So that's where I stand with the Spurs. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I think that they're being overrated a bit.
I'm going to do some wishful thinking as somebody who just drafted Victor Wembanyama on their fantasy team, and believe that he is going to be healthy this year. And as long as he's healthy, if they can get enough games where he qualifies to be an all-star or for any of the awards, they're going to hit the over. So
Do
he's
you have them as a
too,
slide over or
yeah, just a slight over. I mean, I'm just going to say over on this. This is another team, young, defensive forward. They did improve with some of their shooting by getting, um, oh my God, what's his name? Luke Cornett, from the Celtics, who I think is a nice addition, to pair alongside Wemby. They do have some nice other perimeter players. They have ball handlers, people who can score. De'Aaron Fox and Wemby barely played together last year, and um, they're also a trade team. They have a lot of pieces. If they could be a sneaky Giannis team as well. So this is a team that I think is going to hit that under. Now, obviously, if Wemby doesn't play the games, then they're going to hit the under. That's a guaranteed. But as I mentioned earlier, to stay consistent, I'm assuming at least reasonable health. And with that defense, their age, their depth, and their ability to kind of bring it every single night, um, I like them to hit the over.
I liked their sneaky pickup of Olynyk, who they're gonna bring him in, in little areas here. But I like that they're seeing what that looks like next to Wembanyama. And again, like you said with Cornette, playing him with more double big lineups with a big that can stretch the floor. Um, we'll see what they have in Dylan Harper, and I like the combo of Barnes and Sochan or Sohan, excuse me. But yeah, I think I have them getting to 46 wins, just a few games over 500. Um, but
They're
just as
just
an
an
early,
example of a team that has depth like a lot of those other teams, but their depth is young, and they're not going to be utilizing their depth to like preserve an older player to get to the playoffs. Like all these guys are at that stage of their career where they're hungry, and they're I think all going to be rowing in the right direction. So it all comes down to Wemby. He needs to stay healthy to hit this over, and by healthy I mean he just needs to play enough games where he qualifies for awards. Um, and this would be the first year he's done that, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think that's plenty to say about the Spurs for now. Next team, which is a bit more interesting, I think, the Dallas Mavericks. Their over under is 41 and a half. Um, I feel like so I have that as a lock as an over. Um, I think despite Kyrie being out, this is a pretty loaded roster. Um, Now the reason I have it as a lock is I have them winning like 45 games, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's a I think they're clearly not going to be an under, which is why to me it's a lock. So they're not going to win 50 games in no way. But I think that this team has just this is just a loaded roster, and it's not even necessarily that I'm super optimistic about Cooper Flag or anything like that. I just think that this team is going to be really effective in the half court offensively. A little bit similar to what we saw with Houston tonight against OKC, where this giant team that they can get the ball to Anthony Davis and they have this focal point of their group in the half court offense, and then they're going to be a good defensive team too. So even though they're going to be lacking in the area of having a playmaker with the ball, maybe we'll see what they get out of Cooper Flag in that regard. But they have a lot of guys on this team, and to me, that depth and that veteran presence is going to translate to a lot of wins. Now they may lose back to backs and things of that nature, but I can't see this team being 500 or worse. So to me, that's why it's a lock on the over. I would be surprised if this team was only 500. And I think that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with by the time Kyrie's back in like March.
I hope he's back before March because I stashed him on my fantasy team. I was hoping that he'd be back sometime in January. Um, that
Well,
being
yeah,
said,
even better.
I'm actually surprised by some of your takes. I think they're going to be a really bad and struggle on the off on the in the half court offensive setting. I mean, the lack of ball handlers and ball movers and passers and what a odd fit they are going to have with Flag and Anthony Davis playing power forward when we've traditionally seen him at his best playing center. They have a lot of good players, but all of them pretty much play the front court. And when your best backcourt player at this point in time is D'Angelo Russell, that's really scary. I also think that there are some sneaky tank motivations for this team. This is the last year where they control their draft pick. Um, and we've already seen them tank at the end of the year last year to get their draft pick that ended up being successful for them. I can easily see this team, underperforming. And you criticized other teams prior to this point about you don't necessarily see how the players are going to fit and things of that nature. I mean, this is if you were to rank the weirdest fits in the league and how unpredictable what they're going to look like, they are number one by far and away. I mean, we haven't seen a team that's going to be essentially rocking three power forward centers in their starting rotation, none of whom are really reliable 3-point shooters. I mean, Cooper, I'm a Duke guy. Cooper's a good shooter, but a reliable, consistent. I mean, if he shoots 30% from three this year, that's probably a win. And then Anthony Davis, um, again, I think he shoots better from three when he's at the five spot because he's spacing the floor and he's got bigger guys on him, and he can get more space. It's just such a clunky roster, and because of the negative motivations, I'm gonna go under on this.
So I actually thought that D'Angelo Russell was the perfect guy to grab as a seat filler in this spot that's eventually going to be filled by Kyrie because he can basically do a Kyrie impression. Now the intensity of what you're getting out of both of those players is obviously vastly different, but it'll at least allow the team to understand how they're going to operate around this ball handling guard, which Russell has proven to be effective at, not at creating for others, but as
Well,
a
that's
scoring
the
guard.
issue is he's not a proven facilitator. He can score, he can put the ball in the basket, but they don't have somebody who's going to facilitate, set up the offense, run the offense, and get other players good shots. And that's why you already see reports of Jason Kidd saying he's not going to commit to Cooper Flag playing point guard. I mean, if there are already, we've seen this before with teams that come in with this. We saw it with the Pelicans and Zion Williamson, where they're like, we're probably going to see a lot more point Zion, and then all of a sudden the Pelicans finish as the top five, bottom five team in the West, just because they don't have a clear identity. They are going to be a good defensive team, but talk about a team with injury concerns. Anthony Davis has to be number one on one of the top five guys with injury concerns in the league. So it sounds like we disagree on this, but I'm going to go under.
Okay. Yeah, I think that their offense is going to be an issue, but I think that it's going to be better than I think it'll be average. I think they were able to add enough to get by until Kyrie gets back. I think that all of these guys can work around D'Angelo Russell having the ball. Um, Primarily a Russell and Anthony Davis pick and roll with Clay spotting up, and like you said, we'll see what we have out of Cooper Flag. I also think that there's a Daniel Gafford trade that's going to happen at some point. They signed him to an extension, and I don't think he wants to be a backup. And I think that that was basically part of that discussion when he got his extension. So I look forward to seeing if that actually happens.
I do
But
want to say one more thing before we move on from them, which is you made the comp of them to the Houston Rockets last year. I do think that they are going to struggle similarly on offense as to the Rockets. But one very, very key big difference between these two teams is that what made the Rockets an incredible defensive team was their incredible on-ball defenders. They had guys who were incredible on the perimeter. That is actually the biggest weakness of
I'm
this
actually
Mavericks
comparing them
team.
to Houston this season. We saw
Oh,
Houston start the game tonight with Adams, Shingun, Durant, Jabari Smith Jr., and Amen Thompson, and they sort of tried to make it a slugfest with the Thunder while leaning on Shingun and Durant in the half court to sort of uh, run their offense while
yeah.
not having a point of attack creator. And so I think that this team is going to look to get by in a similar way, with
I,
albeit with they don't have a complementary scorer like Shingun as good as Shingun, but I
I
think
mean,
that they're going to operate in a similar way.
Sengun's not just a great scorer, he's an incredible passer. He's essentially Jokic light. And we're also talking about KD, who's arguably one of the greatest scorers of all time. And Cooper Flag's a great player, and I watched a lot of him, and I think he's going to be great, but he's going to be nowhere near the offensive type player that KD can be on a regular night basis.
No, of course not, but they do have a number one scoring option in Anthony Davis, and this team doesn't have a an on-ball scorer facilitator in the same way that Houston doesn't.
Okay.
Um, so
Don't don't
that's why I think
underestimate the don't underestimate the negative
that's
motivation.
where I don't think there is that motivation for them to tank. I don't see that with this group, but maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Next team, the Memphis Grizzlies. The over under is 39 and a half. Do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, this is an over for me. That number is way too low. Way, 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 way too low. Again, assuming health. I mean, if John Morant gets injured or Jaren Jackson gets injured, then fine. I mean, I can't predict that, but for them to say that they're going to regress 9 games despite all of the injury issues that they had last year with Durant or Morant missing as much time as he did, I like Desmond Bain. I do think Desmond Bain's a good player, but um, and some of the advanced analytics in his shooting are great. But I actually think KCP is a good bounce back candidate because I don't think the Magic used him effectively. I think he's going to be very good for this Grizzlies team. I like Cedric Howard as an on-ball defender and the way he's improved over the years. Zach Edey not playing is the one kind of wild card thing that I don't like because who knows when he's going to be back. But I that number is way too low. I think they're going to, finish similarly somewhere around 500, and that may not even get you in the play-in, but that number is way too low.
I'm in agreement there. I think that this is an example of how like off-season narratives can take hold, where they make this Desmond Bain trade, and suddenly there's this sentiment out there that they're tanking or that they're not trying to win games this upcoming season. And I think this is at least a 500 team. Now, granted, I don't have them as this lock way over 39 and a half. I think there's somewhere 42, 43 wins, and I have them in the play-in picture. I would be very surprised if they missed out on the play-in. Um, in fact, they're the 10th team we've talked about, and I think that's the group right there. I don't see anyone below the teams we've talked about pushing any of these teams out. But I think they're going to be good, and I think that they're going to have some names that fans become familiar with that Memphis always does. That's been a calling card of this team the last few years is they've been able to find solid contributors. And then I'm in total agreement about KCP. I talked about it in my episode about the Desmond Bain trade, that another narrative taking hold is that this was just this toxic contract and he's horrible and we have to get rid of him. He's a good contributor and he's not going to give them what Desmond Bain did, obviously, but that doesn't translate to winning 9 less games. So I think they're going to have some guys step up in ways that aren't being talked about right now. I think KCP is going to be a solid veteran. Jaren Jackson Jr. got his big extension. John Morant's got a little bit to prove this year. I like where this team is at right now. I think they're at least a 500 team.
KCP was horribly miscast and misused by that completely inept Magic offense. So
Agreed.
anybody who wants to pigeonhole
It's
him
like
off
suddenly he's a
leader,
horrible player that you have
yeah.
to give up a first round pick to dump. I'm just not on board with that idea. Um, so as I said, that was team number 10. So the next 5 are predicted by Vegas to miss the playoffs. The first one up is the Portland Trailblazers, 35 and a half wins. Kind of a team that a lot of people like because they got younger and they also got rid of DeAndre Ayton and they added Drew Holiday. Um, I am not a fan of Portland in terms of making the jump into the playoffs, into the play-in. I think they're going to miss it again. I think that they're a decent team. They're going to win some games that they shouldn't win. Um, but ultimately, I don't like their team enough to say that this is the year that they take a big step forward. We'll see what they get out of Scoot Henderson, who's still yet to really take a step forward and prove himself. Um, I wasn't a big fan of the Drew Holiday acquisition. Um, I could see him breaking down as the year goes on. I think that they could trade Jeremy Grant. We'll see if any team is going to be interested in that. Just not too excited about this team. Now, that said, I do have them as a slight over. I think that this is an appropriate number, but any sort of optimism about them knocking out one team from the group we've already gone through, I just don't see it. So I have them getting like 36 wins. I think 35 and a half is a tough number to predict with this team, but they're just okay.
I really like this team. I'm actually very excited about them. I love a lot of their pieces. Um, we saw Avdia have some really nice moments. Tamani Kamara is an incredible defender. This is a very, 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 very good defensive team. At the end of the year, they went on a couple stretches where they went like 12-2 in 14 games, and they put up some very, very, very impressive numbers. The Drew Holiday move was interesting in that it kind of spoke to like a win now kind of thing, which was very interesting. But I think there's addition by subtraction by getting rid of DeAndre Ayton on that team. Klingon, I think, will be a better player, and I think he has some real potential. I love Young Hansen. That's one of my favorite draft picks. I love watching him in the preseason, and you see a lot of light Jokic type play from him with his ability to pass and shoot and really have just an incredible vision and read and feel for the game, which is awesome. I think Shaden Sharp is a leap forward kind of candidate if he can stay healthy. And they brought in Drew and Dame, in my opinion, to kind of hopefully get Scoot the kind of tutelage to for him to take a step forward. So I'm actually disagree with you in that I am very excited about this team, and you saw kind of bits and pieces of how this team can be really good. Now, I still don't know if Chauncey Billups is a good coach. That's my one caveat here, but I agree with you. I think the number's too low for them in this realm of teams that are going to miss the playoffs. They're on the higher end for me, and they won almost this number of games last year. I do like it. Now, I hate, for the record, the amount of money that they have as dead cap money with the buyout of Ayton and that
Yeah.
ridiculous number they have to just have like 77 million of dead money on your books is never a good sign, but they have enough young guys that they can probably withstand it. So I'm gonna go also with you as a slide over.
Do you, what do you like in terms of their odds of knocking off one of the teams in the top 10 that we talked about? Would it be a team like Dallas tanking and that's how they make it?
Well, yeah, I do think that they have made moves that communicate to me that they are opposite incentivized from having to tank to win. They are making moves to win now. They've kind of been in tank mode for years now. I mean, I can't remember the last time they were in the playoffs. It's been a long time, and I think they're just actually trying to make a culture shift, which is why they went out and got Drew Holiday and brought Dame back, was really to kind of have a culture shift here. So I don't think that they're going to be trying to tank or get into the lottery as the year goes on. So
No, definitely not.
I can easily see them having surpassing the Mavericks, but I could equally see them back in the lottery just because you know their the talent doesn't progress or Chauncey just doesn't develop the way that I'd like to see him develop.
Yeah, I think if they miss the playoffs that there's a good chance they fire Chauncey because yeah, they are making it clear that they want to start getting some playoff experience for these young players. I think they're going to finish somewhere in the high 30s. I have them as winning 37 games. But I do admire what they're doing. You can only tank for so long. At some point, it's like we have our group of young players that we believe in, and now we have to nurture their growth. And I think that's the transition that we're seeing with Portland. So I don't dislike what they're doing. It's just it's a difficult group in the West, and I think they're going to have to wait for a team like the Warriors to fall off, and to a lesser extent the Lakers because they have Luka, and then there's a team like Dallas. But some of these old teams and the Clippers too, I think have to drop out of the picture before Portland gets its chance to get some playoff experience. And I think that's what they're planning for. And they're going to see this year if they could squeeze in. It would be a tremendous victory for them if they could make the play in and at least give these young guys a meaningful game to play in.
Now,
But yeah,
similarly,
that's all I have to
I
say about them.
um, just speed rounding this: Phoenix, Utah, and Sac. They're all unders for me. Sac is an absolute mess. Phoenix and Utah don't want to win, and I don't see them having the talent to win. I think they're all three of them are very clearly under teams. For Utah's case, they brought back Will Hardy and extended him at such an odd point in time that only communicated to me that they pretty much told him like, no, we want you to go out and suck. Don't worry about it. We have no expectations for you. We expect you to lose. The Kings are completely inept, and that team is horribly built. And it's amazing that we went from that beam team to this conglomerate of mid. Um, I could also see Sabonis getting moved halfway through the season just because they're idiots. And Phoenix, I think they mean well. And I actually really like Kamon Malawach, and I think he's fantastic. Go Blue Devils! But that's such a weirdly built team, and Jalen Green and Booker. I don't love the way that that fits. So I think all three of those are easy unders for me. No locks, but well, I will lock the Jazz. The Jazz are a lock under for me.
Yeah,
But the other two
I'm an under on the
are
Jazz too. I have them winning like 15 games. That their number's 19 and a half. I don't know who would think that the Jazz want to get to 20 wins. Phoenix also an under, although not a huge under. I think they're somewhere in the mid to high 20s just because that team's just nowhere near good enough to beat to win enough games, that they're just going to have a tough time out here in the West. Um, Everything you said about Sacramento, I would apply to New Orleans. I hate the way New Orleans built their team. To me, that's a lock under for New Orleans. I don't think they get close to 30 wins. I really hate their
Oh,
team, and I think they missed the boat on trading Zion, because I think that situation is going to nosedive this year. The Kings, I'm actually a little more bullish on, where I think that this is an over for the Kings. 32.5 is kind of low. I have them somewhere in like the 34 or 35 range. Um, because I do think that they have enough good players to beat some of the shitty teams in the league. But that's how I feel about the remaining group. I have New Orleans, Phoenix, and Utah under, with Utah and New Orleans being lock unders, and then I have Sacramento winning in the mid 30s, so they're an over for me.
wow. I wanted to end this just because I I did not think you were going to go that way on the Pelicans because I could not disagree with you more.
Oh, I hate what they did.
Dude, that team has a ton of professional basketball players that are talented. Um, Again, assuming health, assuming Skinny Zion can actually stay healthy this year, they're going to get DeJounte Murray back at some point. I don't love Jordan Poole. You know that. I've been on record for that for years. I hate him. But they have a ton of talent. I love Herb Jones. I love Trey Murphy. They have shooting. Yves Missi is a good rim protector who can roll it. That team is deep. And that's not for me to say that I think they're going to be in the playoffs, but to put them at 30 wins, that's wild to me. That is an incredibly low number. I am tempted to lock it at over 30 wins because that is an incredibly low number for this team. But I am going to go over. I would, if you gave me a choice, would I rather have the Pelicans roster or the Kings roster? I would so much rather have the Pelicans roster this year. Um,
Uh,
I
Long
I'm
term, I'd rather
shocked.
have the Pelicans roster, but not this year. The only guys I really like on this team are Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this situation goes south the way that I'm predicting it will, if they look to do a Herb Jones trade. Um, and then, yeah, I'm just not going to fall for the Zion thing again. I think that this is just going to be another messy year. Um, I hate Jordan Poole. I think that he's going to make everyone in this lineup worse. I'd feel a little differently if they were starting the year with DeJounte Murray, but I believe he's out till January. I could be
I,
wrong about that.
all that to be said, I don't, I understand that, but it's not like this line is at like 39 and a half. Like to think that they're going to win 20, any number in the 20 of games is just crazy with this amount of talent on there and some of the crappy teams on the West and then them having to go, spurts on the East. I mean, they can snooze their way into a low 30 games. I mean, that's still over 10 games under 500. I mean, they're still a lottery team, but that number is way too low for the amount of talent they have.
Well, that looks like our biggest disagreement, but with that, we'll wrap up the West, and next we'll move on to the East, and then we'll do predictions after that.